If you enjoyed this video and want to see more deep dives into the histories that define our world, do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. It helps us keep digging. Now let's get into it. Think you know Bali? Let me guess. Yoga retreats, infinity pools, digital nomads typing on MacBooks with a backdrop of emerald rice fields. Eat, pray, love. It's an image worth billions, but it's a lie. Or at least, it's the thinnest, most fragile veneer plastered over a reality of fire, blood, and defiant magic. The real Bali isn't a paradise you can buy. It's an island forged in the violence of colliding continents, a culture that chose mass suicide over surrender, and a spirit so profound it organizes every drop of water across a million fields. This isn't the story of your next vacation. This is the story of the real Bali, the unbreakable island. To understand this place, you have to go past the tourist facade, beyond the curated experiences, and dig into the raw, powerful, and often contradictory forces that have shaped it. Before Bali was an idea, a culture, or a destination, it was an act of geological violence. The island exists because two colossal pieces of the Earth's crust are locked in a slow, grinding, and unending collision. South of the island, in the depths of the Indian Ocean, the Australia tectonic plate is being forced underneath the Sunda plate, a process known as subduction. This is not a gentle process. The Australia plate moves north-northwest at a rate of about 70 millimeters per year, while the Sunda plate inches west-northwest at about 21 millimeters per year. The result is a colossal crash happening in geological slow motion, creating the deep Sunda-Java Trench. As the Australia plate descends into the mantle, it reaches a depth of about 100 miles, where the heat and pressure become so immense that the rock begins to melt. This molten material, or magma, being less dense than the surrounding rock, rises violently towards the surface. It punches through the crust to form the volcanoes of the Indonesian archipelago, a chain of fire that includes the very spine of Bali. The island's highest point and most sacred peak, Mount Agung, is a direct consequence of this process. Standing at 9,944 feet, it is a classic stratovolcano, built up over millennia by recurrent eruptions of andesite lava, volcanic ash, and pyroclastic debris. The island's entire landscape has been shaped by this volcanic activity. Its history is marked by at least two major caldera-forming eruptions, cataclysmic events that collapsed mountains into vast craters. This is the fundamental, inescapable truth of Bali. It is not a gentle, passive paradise. It is an island built by fire, perched on a fault line, and perpetually subject to the whims of the planet's most powerful forces. Long before the arrival of Hinduism, the first inhabitants of Bali developed a belief system that was a direct reflection of their violent, powerful environment. This was a world of animism, a cosmology where every rock, river, and mountain possessed a distinct spiritual essence. The earliest Balinese mythology tells a creation story born from this reverence for the natural world. In the beginning of time, there was only Antaboga, the world serpent. Through deep meditation, Antaboga created the world turtle, Bedawang Nala, upon whose shell the entire world rests. On the turtle's back lie two more snakes and the black stone, which serves as the lid to the underworld. This belief system codified the awe and terror inspired by the island's geology. It's no coincidence that the most sacred places in this early animist faith were the island's most formidable natural features, the great volcanoes like Mount Agung and Mount Batur. For centuries, the island of Java to the west of Bali was the center of gravity for the region. It was home to the Majapahit Empire, one of the last great Hindu-Buddhist empires in Southeast Asia. From the 13th to the 15th centuries, Majapahit was a thalassocracy of immense power, its influence stretching from Sumatra to New Guinea, encompassing 98 tributaries across the archipelago. In 1343, under the leadership of its legendary and ambitious prime minister, Gajah Mada, the empire's forces conquered Bali, making it a vassal state. But by the late 15th and early 16th centuries, the political and religious landscape of the region was shifting dramatically. Islamic sultanates were rising across Java, and the Hindu-Buddhist Majapahit Empire began to crumble. What followed was one of the most pivotal events in Balinese history, a mass exodus. Faced with conversion or subjugation, the elite of the dying Majapahit Empire fled east. A wave of Hindu priests, artists, intellectuals, warriors, and royalty, abandoned Java and sought refuge on the neighboring island of Bali. They brought with them their sacred texts, their courtly traditions, and their advanced knowledge of Hindu philosophy and ritual. Bali transformed from a vassal state into a sanctuary. It became a cultural ark, the last major stronghold of Hindu Javanese civilization, tasked with preserving a legacy that was being erased from its homeland. The culture of the Majapahit refugees did not simply overwrite Bali's indigenous beliefs. Instead, one of the world's most fascinating religious fusions occurred. The sophisticated, literature-based Hinduism of the Javanese court blended seamlessly with Bali's deep-rooted animism, ancestor worship, and reverence for local spirits. The result was a unique, syncretic faith known as Agama Hindu Dharma or Agama Tirtha, the religion of holy water, a belief system that is uniquely and profoundly Balinese. The first Europeans, Dutch explorers, arrived in Bali in 1597, mesmerized by a tropical kingdom with a king who reportedly had hundreds of wives. For centuries, their presence was limited, but by the mid-19th century, the Dutch colonial appetite had grown, and their ambitions in the East Indies turned toward total subjugation. They gradually annexed the northern Balinese states, but the powerful southern kingdoms centered around Badung and Klungkung fiercely resisted. The Dutch, seeking a pretext for a full-scale invasion, found one in a clash of laws. For centuries, the Balinese kings had practiced tawang karang, the traditional right to claim the cargo of any ship that wrecked on their shores. To the Balinese, this was sovereign law. To the Dutch, it was piracy. In May 1904, a Chinese schooner named the Sri Kumala ran aground on the reef near Sanur in the kingdom of Badung. The Balinese, as was their custom, plundered the wreck. The Dutch demanded a huge sum in compensation. The king of Badung refused. This, combined with Dutch moral outrage over local customs, like the ritual suicide of a king's widows, known as masadia, provided the perfect justification for intervention. In June 1906, the Dutch initiated a naval blockade of the southern coast and issued a series of ultimatums. On September 14, 1906, the 6th military expedition of the Dutch colonial army landed on the beaches of Sanur. They marched inland toward the capital of Badung Denpasar, encountering only sporadic resistance. As the Dutch forces approached the royal palace, or Puri, they saw smoke rising and heard the frantic, rhythmic beating of drums. Then a silent, ghostly procession emerged. It was led by the Raja of Badung, borne on a palanquin by 4 bearers. He was dressed not for battle, but for his own funeral, in pristine white cremation garments, adorned with his most magnificent jewelry, and carrying a sacred ceremonial dagger, a kris. This was the beginning of a Puputan. The word in Balinese means to come to an end or to finish. It was a mass ritual suicide, a final, desperate act of defiance to choose an honorable death over the humiliation of surrender to a foreign power. When the procession was 100 paces from the Dutch lines, it halted. The Raja stepped down from his palanquin. He gave a signal to a priest who stepped forward and plunged his own dagger deep into the king's breast. That single act triggered a frenzy of ritualistic slaughter. The rest of the procession began turning their crises on themselves and on each other. In a final act of contempt, the women mockingly threw their gold coins and jewelry at the feet of the stunned Dutch troops. What happened next is disputed. Dutch accounts claim a stray shot, or an attack by lance and spear, prompted them to open fire. Balinese accounts maintain the Dutch fired first into the crowd of traditionally armed people. When the guns finally fell silent, an estimated 1,000 Balinese lay dead. The Dutch soldiers then moved in to loot the bodies of their valuables before sacking and razing the palace to the ground. The Badung Puputan of 1906 was not an isolated event. It was the most famous of at least 5 such rituals in Bali's history. 2 years later, in 1908, the Dutch provoked another conflict with the Kingdom of Klungkung, this time over an attempt to monopolize the opium trade. How does a culture endure such trauma? How does a society that witnessed its leaders choose mass suicide over subjugation not just survive, but thrive? To understand the resilience of Bali, one must understand its core operating philosophy, Tri Hita Karana. This Sanskrit phrase translates to the 3 causes of well-being, or 3 causes of prosperity. It is a simple yet profound concept that forms the invisible architecture of Balinese life. It dictates that true happiness and harmony can only be achieved by maintaining balance in 3 essential relationships: parahyangan, harmony with the divine, with God and the spiritual world. Pawangan, harmony among people, within the community and society. Palamahan, harmony with nature, with the environment and all living things. The greatest physical manifestation of Tri Hita Karana in action is the Subak system, Bali's ancient and intricate irrigation network. Recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Subak is far more than just an agricultural technique. It is a 1,000-year-old social and spiritual ecosystem. Dating back to at least the 9th century, the system is a complex web of canals, tunnels, and weirs that captures water from the island's volcanic crater lakes and rivers and channels it down through a cascading series of terraced rice paddies. The Subak system is managed not by a central authority, but by a democratic federation of over 1,200 autonomous water collectives. Each collective consists of the farmers whose fields are fed by a common water source. At the heart of this system are the water temples. Priests, known as pemangku, are the ultimate arbiters of the system. They don't dictate. They facilitate harmony. If the Subak system is the grand, landscape-scale expression of Balinese philosophy, the Kanangsari is its intimate daily practice. These are the small, beautiful offerings found everywhere on the island, on sidewalks, in doorways, on the dashboards of cars, and at the foot of statues. Each Kanangsari is a miniature work of art, a tiny woven basket of palm leaf filled with a carefully arranged selection of flowers, rice, incense, and sometimes sweets or a coin. The symbolism is rich and precise. The base of the basket represents the three powers of the Hindu Trinity: Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. The different colored flowers represent different gods in cardinal directions. The offering is sprinkled with holy water, fusing the elements, and the smoke from the burning incense carries the essence, or sari, of the offering up to the heavens. Fast forward to the 21st century, and a new wave of foreigners is arriving in Bali. They are not conquerors or colonial administrators. They are digital nomads, armed with laptops and seeking a life of tropical productivity. This latest migration has created new cultural enclaves, most famously in two distinct hubs that represent the two modern faces of Bali. First, there is Canggu. This is Bali's social, hip playground, the undisputed capital of the island's digital nomad scene. It's a high-energy world of trendy cafes, buzzing beach clubs, and co-working spaces so advanced you can order a flat white delivered to your desk via Slack. Then there is Ubud. This is Bali's cultural and wellness hub, a jungle escape nestled among rice paddies and ravines. This is where the eat, pray, love fantasy is most actively pursued. This modern influx, combined with decades of mass tourism, has put Bali's soul under immense pressure. The living museum policy, born from the ashes of the Puputan, has run amok. The island is now grappling with the severe consequences of over-tourism. The harmony with nature is under assault. Beaches are choked with plastic, vital water supplies are being drained to fill resort swimming pools, and coral reefs are dying, and the harmony with the divine is being cheapened and eroded. Unruly tourists, in a quest for the perfect selfie, desecrate sacred temples, climb holy trees, and dress inappropriately, treating a living, breathing culture as a mere backdrop for their vacation content. For centuries, the ecological identity of the Balinese was tied to agriculture. Now tourism is rapidly displacing it, fundamentally changing the relationship between the people and their land. This modern era has brought its own forms of violence. The most profound modern trauma occurred on October 12, 2002, when terrorist bombs ripped through the tourist district of Kuta, killing 202 people, including 88 Australians and 38 Indonesians. In the aftermath, however, the deep-seated resilience of Balinese culture came to the fore. The international response, known as Operation Alliance, brought Australian and Indonesian authorities together in an unprecedented feat of cooperation. This entire modern condition presents a new kind of battle for Bali. The core philosophy of Tri Hita Karana is now in direct conflict with the consequences of the island's global fame. The fight is no longer a physical Puputan against a foreign army, but a spiritual Puputan against the corrosive effects of being loved to death. The story of Bali is not a simple travelogue of a tropical paradise. It is a saga of profound and powerful contradictions. It is an island born from the planet's most violent geological forces that came to cherish a philosophy of absolute social harmony. It is a culture that, when faced with conquest, met it with an act of sublime, terrifying defiance, choosing a spiritual victory in death over a physical life in servitude. It is a spiritual ecosystem that engineered a miracle of sustainable agriculture, a 1,000-year-old system of communal cooperation that now finds itself threatened by the very people who come to admire its beauty. The story of Bali is the story of a relentless spirit, a spirit that absorbed gods, defied empires, and engineered harmony from chaos. Today, the battle for Bali's soul is quieter than the Puputan, fought not with crises and cannons, but with zoning laws, tourist taxes, and the daily defiant act of placing a kanang sari on the pavement to rebalance the world. The world sees a paradise, but Bali knows the truth. Paradise is not a place you find, it's a balance you fight to maintain every single day.